I am especially excited about this next session. I think a lot of you, as soon as we decided to do the CSM Summit, we knew we wanted to do this session because there's so many of you that care, as much as we like to admit it, I don't think a lot of you dreamed as being CSMs when you were kids, right? It didn't exist. And now that you're in a career in customer success, love it as much as you do, sometimes there's some questions on how to build a career in customer success. For our colleagues in sales or product or marketing, those teams have been around seemingly forever. And so there's a ton of examples on how to build a great career and how to take career steps in those departments. Customer success, it's newer. And so we're all still trying to figure this out together. So what we have is we have a really cool panel of multiple different people that show different angles to a customer success career. And so we've brought all of them together. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Kristi Falteruso. If you're in customer success and you've spent, 5 minutes on LinkedIn, you know about Kristi. She is one of the preeminent top thought leaders in customer success. And I'm really excited to invite Kristi and the rest of the panel, and make sure to stay tuned until the end of the panel because Kristi has a cool announcement that I'm not going to give away right now. Kristi, you ready to get started?
Thank you. Yes, let's do this. Right. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for the very flattering introduction. And thank you everyone for joining us today. This is a super, super critical topic. I personally have been very intentional about building my professional journey over the years. And so when I talk to a lot of customer success professionals, they're either waiting for their companies to dictate their next move, or they're unclear of how they make that next leap forward. And so I'm thrilled to welcome to this panel 4 CS professionals who are going to share their journey along with some great tips and insights about how you can think about your career trajectory and what's next. Because I think, the one thing I can tell you is it doesn't need to be this linear path of you as an individual contributor into some team lead role, into a leader and VP and so on and so forth. And it's all about creating your own journey. So I think today's conversation is going to be really exciting. So please join me in welcoming Max, Krista, Vanessa, and Al. So thank you guys. All right, so before we get started, it would be great if each of you could just share with us a little bit about your professional journey, kind of lead us through, how you got into CS and kind of how you've navigated through that. So why don't we get started, Max, if you would be so willing to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kristi. And also thank you to Mark for just emceeing the heck out of this event. It's been amazing. So yeah, sure. So a little bit about my background, how I got into client success. Well, fourscore and what seems like a million years ago, I started my career in telecommunications as an account manager. I was quickly promoted to our Boston office, where I started to work with and manage customers in the higher education vertical. So think Harvard, MIT, BC, BU. From there, I came out to the West Coast to help lead the customer effort out here in San Francisco. That's where I'm based right now. I was in San Francisco for a bit and kept hearing about this idea about a startup. And after speaking to a few people, I knew that I had to learn more. In my conversations, I learned about this role, and I thought that the CSM role was really the next step for me. As I thought about it, it was almost the next evolution of the account management role. So I made the jump to my first SaaS company, which is a business intelligence startup. And I had to learn how to truly pivot from this reactive task taker to a proactive account manager. I had to learn how to map a customer's goals and initiatives and KPIs back to the platform, back to the data set. So that was a huge learning experience for me and really my first intro into customer success. From there, I made the jump to a predictive marketing analytics firm, and that was a great experience for me because I basically helped build the customer success function up from the ground up, from scratch. And then I made the jump to a company called App Annie, which is a predictive marketing analytics firm. There, I led our enterprise and mid-market teams. And then I also took my account management experience. We built this renewal account management role. And so it was kind of a hybrid of the two as well. I then had the opportunity to break into the gig economy space where I led global success for a company who built a high volume applicant tracking system. And then I went to the outside and actually started consulting, which was great. Most recently, now I'm at Modern Health. The vice president of client success over at App Annie reached out to me and said, hey, there's this amazing company, this great vision. They are adding to the standard benefits package, which is medical, dental, and vision, and augmenting that by offering mental health care as well. So we are on this mission to destigmatize and scale modern mental health. And so there I bookend the client success lifecycle by owning the renewals and the onboarding team at Modern Health.
What an impressive journey, Max. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Krista, let's hear from you.
Great. So I am Krista Roberts, and I am a senior customer success manager here at Client Success. So my journey started, really similar as a lot of other folks out of college, right into a sales opportunity, had a couple different sales positions, and moving into kind of more traditional account management, account executive roles. And what I quickly learned in those opportunities was that, I really loved working with customers. Maybe not frontline sales, hardcore sales, but definitely loved building those relationships and looking at different opportunities that I could continue to do that. So that led me to customer success back in 2016. And I really haven't turned back since then. So held a few different positions in a few different SaaS companies, both individual contributor, player coach, and also leading and growing customer success functions within an organization. And really at the end of the day, it all comes down to me just loving to work with customers to help them achieve their goals and their strategy that they're putting forth for their business. And so, now I'm here at Client Success in an individual contributor role, but really taking the opportunity to work with leaders of our customers, which are leading customer success teams themselves, and really acting as more of a consultant as they're building out those functions and utilizing our platform.
Awesome. Thank you, Krista. Vanessa.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So my journey, I got started before customer success, existed. My first, career and kind of segue into this was actually in professional services. So probably a lot of you are familiar, but, with big, technology software deployments, a lot of companies will have a services, a pro serve org that goes and, has a statement of work and goes and works with the customer to deploy it. So when I first got started, this was on-premise software deployment. So even before SaaS, so dating myself a little bit, but I would go work with different banks around the world, mostly in Latin America, a little bit in the Middle East, to gather requirements, right, in the post-sale motion, and then actually go deploy the software locally on their servers. From that experience, I was doing that for a couple of years, and I really loved working with customers, forming relationships, understanding the business pain, understanding how this new software and new processes were actually going to add to their business, make their employees' lives a little bit easier. So really loved that. And from there, I got my first opportunity to then work at a fintech company in what was at first called an account management role. So it was definitely different than the pro serve role I was doing, but I had that subject matter expertise in the finance technology space. And I just knew that I loved working with customers. So they hired me and gave me a chance. From there, I quickly saw that it was definitely more of a CSM role. My first task there was, deploying Gainside and working on onboarding, and I had to renew customers. So we changed kind of the title to CSM. And then, after I was there for about a year, started building out a team there. Still a little bit of a small startup, but started to build out a team, really liked that muscle, grew kind of our scale. We actually even did some upsell and cross-sell, so a little bit more unique, so kind of account managing. Really liked that. But what I really seen was that, for the first 7 years of my career, it was all in the financial technology space. So I thought, I want to do something different. I took a step back then to be a senior enterprise CSM at a company called Narvar. It was a little bit more of a bigger stage company, 300 plus people. And it was in the e-commerce space. So I was working with retailers like Nike and Nordstrom and Sephora, just all these really cool companies. And it was just an opportunity to learn a whole new subject matter. So that was really exciting. Did that for a little bit, took over our commercial and strategic accounts team where I was then managing when a recruiter from Slack reached out. And, from then I'd used Slack in all my previous companies, was super bought into the vision, the company, and just the quality and caliber of the CS leadership at Slack. So took a step down again to be an individual contributor at Slack in our enterprise CS team, where I've been for the last 2.5 years. It's been an amazing journey with the company, the people, and our customers, and just watching the company scale so quickly. And currently right now, I'm actually managing our Scale CS team, which has been really exciting to move back into a manager position for the third time, where I am hiring CSMs based out of San Francisco. We're also hiring some out of Denver and Chicago. So LinkedIn me if you're interested.
Love the shameless plug, Vanessa. Thank you. All right, Al.
Hey, Al Budricky here. I'm the head of platform and ecosystem marketing at Airtable. And so my career to date starts in 2009 when I graduated college. Job market was pretty bad back then. So fun trivia fact, I made a music video resume that went viral and it got me my first job at a marketing agency. So if you want to check out Hire Me on YouTube, you can see it. It's from like a decade ago. I'm a lot younger than I am right now, but a good piece of trivia. Worked at a marketing agency for a couple years and then was hired by HubSpot, where I got to know Mark as a CSM. So that's where my first foray into CS work started. It made a really good transition because HubSpot at the time was starting an agency partner program, so like their channel reseller and partner program. And because I worked at an agency, it made me a really good fit to actually start consulting customers who were agencies, because it was sort of a really nice, like, hey, I understand you, good transition. From there, I was a CSM for about 2 years, moved over to the marketing team, where I actually helped support the greater agency partner program from a channel marketing perspective. A couple years after that at HubSpot, moved on to the platform marketing team, where I helped grow their developer and app partner programs. And then most recently, after 9 years at HubSpot, I transitioned over to Airtable, where I am now to help grow their platform developer ecosystem. So that's me.
I love that story, Alan. We're going to get into a lot of details around those transitions you've made. So, what I loved about each of your stories is that nobody here started in customer success, right? You had to break in through untraditional means, right? Like you had some other role that maybe you had some transferable skills. And I think that's really common in the customer success space, right? Is that folks are transitioning from other roles into this world. So I'd love it if you guys could share with us, what do you think led to your successful transition, and how did your previous experience help set you up to succeed? So Vanessa, let's start with you.
It's a great question, and I think you touched on a lot of it. And I think both Chris and I did as well. So I think with people looking to break into customer success, one of the things we're always looking for is just, can you work with customers? Can you understand and think strategically and ask questions about their business and understand their goals? And you can talk about your company and what you do and how you can help solve that pain. So I just think having some of those customer facing skills and qualities, I think, is so important. So whether you were in sales or you were an amazing BDR and you just can have those proof points that you're able to do that, I think that's one of the things that we really look for and makes you successful. I think one of the other things when you think about breaking into customer success is we also want people that have the subject matter expertise, right? So like I mentioned from my story, I'd never been an account manager or CSM before, but I knew a lot about the space of the industry. And, when we were at Narvar, one of the hires we made had actually worked, at a customer in their e-com department, right? So she had never been even customer facing, but we wanted someone that had that subject matter expertise. So I think those are kind of like the two different tips I would think about when you want to break into a CS role.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. What about you, Max? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely much of the same, actually. When I made the jump to customer success, there was definitely a steep learning curve for me. I thought that I knew what I was getting into, but it was so much more. It was an entire context shift that my brain had to make, again, from this reactive to a proactive mindset. I had to learn how to be a real a partner, a consultant, and a guide to help my customers get to where they needed to be to reach their full potential. I think, what helped lead to a successful transition was, very much what Vanessa said. You have to go and learn the customer's business. And I had to do that as an account manager. So I was able to map that skill set into client success and into being a CSM. And that's what helped me really rev up the career and hit the ground running, was knowing like, hey, you need to jump into a business, learn what makes them run, what makes them tick, what's under the hood. And then once you can do that, then you can accurately map those goals, initiatives, and KPIs back to your product.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. And then Al, you had a very interesting journey. So what do you think about for you? Because I think you anchor more on the subject matter expertise, having worked in that ecosystem and then transitioning in. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, it kind of boils down to like two things that made the transition work pretty well. One, as I was kind of like alluding to in my intro, I understood the persona of like the agency pretty well. So that allowed me to like, understand what they were struggling with. I could empathize with them. And I didn't like know going into a CS role that was going to be super important, but I definitely like picked up on it after a while. I was like, hey, we're speaking the same language, and like I come from the same place that you are in right now, so that helped out a lot. And then I think the second thing was just like at the agency, I was doing account management, so I knew what like went into serving like clients and trying to figure out what their goals were and then building strategies based on that. So that translated nicely. I think the steepest learning curve for me, though, as part of that was as a CS, I had a book of business of about like 80 customers. When I was on the account management side of the agency, it was only like 3 or 4. So just like that transition, that mind shift for me was a bit challenging. But yeah.
Very good. All right, great. Let's hop to our next question. So you all shared very impressive journeys with me and everyone here. So, you all had different moves along the way. Do you feel that those moves were intentional on your part and that you had control over them, or you had been thinking about this? Or do you feel like you kind of left that in the hands of the organization that you were with? Because what I hear from a lot of folks is that, oh, I'm waiting for my manager to recognize my work and my hard effort and promote me. So I'm trying to figure out, and I want to share with everyone, right? Do you feel like you've been intentional about all of the moves that you've made, or do you feel like you kind of left that into the hands of someone else? So Krista, why don't we start with you? Because you had quite a few moves there.
Yeah. So I definitely think that early in my career, coming right out of college and going to work for a large company, I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car here in St. Louis, where the world headquarters are. I definitely kind of let my path initially like just be in the hands of my manager, because they had very defined career paths, and it's, if you do this, you'll get this promotion, if you do this, you'll get this. And so someone very young out of school, I definitely let that in that first position, and honestly in my next company too. I was there for 4 years and I loved the company and I loved the people, but I did the same thing day one that I did after 4 years being there, like every day, and there just wasn't opportunity. So that was when I decided to really just take it upon myself and start making those moves and doing what was best for me for my career, and obviously having great mentors and leaders along the way to help give me advice, but taking the initiative to find that next opportunity for what I want to accomplish in my career, whether it be learning something new or a new product that I'm interested in, but not necessarily a title or a specific status, but just continuing to grow and learn.
That's great. And that's something I think is probably generally true for a lot of us, right? Like when you're more junior or you're less experienced, you don't know how the world works, right? So you're too naive and you're too trusting, right? That if you just do what you're told to do, that you'll be recognized for that, and that people are going to want to give you more money, and that people are going to want to give you titles. And guess what? That's not the way the world works. Your employers will likely try to get as much out of you as they can until you maybe raise your hand and ask for something different, right? So at least that's true from my experience, Kristen. It sounds like the same for you. And I share a similar story, right? With I've kind of done the same thing where I kind of let for a long time the natural progression be in the hands of the organization I was a part of, rather than taking control over that. So I would give that advice to somebody else more junior in their career today to maybe stop. Don't let that happen if you can, and you can avoid that, and control your destiny. So what about the rest of you guys? Is anyone else, similar story? What would you do different? How have you controlled your career, or maybe not?
I think for me, it kind of similar in the way where I think college and just other education kind of conditioned you to this way where you show up for class, you get good grades, you're going to do great, and you're going to move on, and people will clap for you. And I think to your point, as you were saying, like it's just not the way the world works. And the sooner you can realize that, the better. For me, I really had to sit down and like talk with people in my network, speak with like my manager directly, set up like monthly career chats to actually start digging in. And I feel like it came a little too late for me because I reached a point actually where I was just like, I'm not moving up. Why is that? And it's like, well, you kind of got to take ownership over it. So like actually digging in and having those conversations and figuring out what you need to work in order to move up was super important for me.
I love that. And I think you made a great point, right? It's owning your career path, right? Owning that outcome. Very, very important point. What about you, Vanessa?
Yeah, sorry, I was going to defend like everything everyone's saying. I really agree with. I would say a little bit of my story. That first job out of college, I was there for 3 years, and I was very much in like a consultant role. And so we're billed per hour to the customer, and the more senior you are, the higher the company can bill for your time. And so, I had been doing that role for about like 2 years, 2.5 years. And I was starting to see like, hey, I'm getting capped out. I'm doing the same thing. So I wanted to do something different within that tech company. So I was like, oh, I'm interested in maybe going into the pre-sales motion. But literally management told me, oh, no, we're billing you at such a high rate. Like, we don't want you to move anywhere else. Like, so it was, they were even just being upfront of like, no, we're going to get the most out of you. We're going to keep putting on the same types of projects. So that for me was really like, okay, I need to be the CEO of my career. And if I'm not going to get something different or learn something new here, I need to go out. And so one of the things that you asked earlier, like, is it intention or is it luck? I think it's a little bit of both. And I say that because, when I was looking to make my first move out of professional services, it's like, what do I want to do? Like this account management thing I've been hearing about. Oh, investor relations. Maybe I'll go work for like within the bank, within like a hedge fund. Oh, maybe operations. So I started just actually doing a bunch of research on all three of those career paths. And I actually would then make versions of my resumes that kind of were more tailored. It was the same experience that I had at the company, but I would use a terminology, or I would play up or play down parts of my experience that would resonate with those three types of roles. And then boom, I happened to get the account management role, which turned into a CS role. So that was a little bit of luck. That was just the company and the fit that happened first, but I was intentional about trying to go after a new experience, and it happened to work out.
I love that. I love how intentional, again, going back to that you were in creating 3 different versions of your resume and really trying to, and doing your research, right? So you kind of set yourself up to land the career that was going to resonate the best with you. So that's awesome. And while I have you, Vanessa, let's segue to our next question. So you and Krista actually shared really interesting stories, right? Where you kind of went from this path from an individual contributor role to a leadership role, back to an IC role. And, I think that there is this like, this perception, right? Or this negative stereotype that, being in an individual contributor role for too long, or moving from leadership back to an IC role, right? You're moving backwards. And, I want to help break that, because that's just not the case. And I know at Slack, you guys have a lot of structure around the IC path and what that looks like and how it progresses. So I'd love it if you could explain your decision-making around why you may have gone from leadership back to an individual contributor role, and then how you view that in terms of, the growth trajectory that is available at a company like Slack, as an example.
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm going to try to like condense my answer, but I could probably talk about this for like a whole 30-minute sub session. But yeah, no, so to your point, I completely agree. I think, again, being intentional, being the CEO of your career, I think you're always trying to think, what's my end goal? What do I maybe want to achieve in 5-10 years? And that can change, but then going and making sure you get the experience to make you well-rounded for that end outcome. So for me, when I was first leading a team, it was in a very super small company, and we weren't growing, and I wasn't getting that like hyper growth experience that I wanted. And I had the same subject matter expertise. I didn't want to be pigeonholed, 10 years out as only a fintech professional. And so what did I say? Okay, I need actually different subject matter, because I want to be a SaaS professional. And so, okay, great. If I want to go now into a bigger company that's growing quicker, a different subject matter, I'm going to have to take a step back down and be a CSM again. And so that was a choice I made. And I think it was a great choice because it was a bigger company with, bigger logo, more people recognize it. Similar, moving to Slack, as I was thinking about, I really want to be a CS leader one day. I want to lead high quality teams. What I had seen was that I was still always in these startups, right? Kind of self-taught, scrappy. And I saw, hey, I really want to go to a big company that has a really great program. And I want to learn well from leaders who've done it before. And Slack was able to give that. So, taking a step back down again, it was, I'm still making myself a more well-rounded person and professional and customer success professional, that I'm getting this experience at a bigger company that has, process and scale. But for me, my end goal really has always been leadership. Like, I love working with people, building process. I think it's super interesting. And so to pivot into the second part of your question, which is, that's not sometimes for everyone, right? To Krista's point, right? Sometimes being able to really be a true consultant for your customer, understand their pains, build different exec sponsor relationships, like that's all really fun, interesting, cool stuff. And some people really love doing that. And so, to talk about Slack, we have many different levels of CSMs, even with just in our enterprise team. You come in as a CSM1, then you move up to CSM2, then you can be a senior CSM, then a senior CSM2, then you can be a principal CSM. And so there's some people at Slack that are in these amazing principal CSM roles, who have a ton of experience, but they love doing that. And so, just again, it's not for everyone. I would say really think about, do you want to build and mentor people a little bit even more than managing customers? Great, then maybe management is for you, but it's not the only option.
Yeah, I love that. And I just, for anybody who is debating, people management is hard, right? And to your point, it's not for everybody. It's probably the hardest work I've ever done professionally is leading people, more so than changing processes or even justifying customer success, right? So it is not for everybody, but you could still be wildly successful and have an amazing career trajectory and not have to ever do that. So I love that. So Krista, let's hear a little bit about your decision-making, right? Because you did the same thing, right? You kind of went from IC to leadership to IC to more of this, like, to your point, consultant role that you're in today. So I'd love to just hear the decision-making around your journey and how you kind of perceive that future for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. So, I agree. I think that, and I said it earlier that, for me, I'm not necessarily looking for that next title or that next promotion. It's really the opportunity that makes sense for me in my overall journey. And, I love coaching and developing, whether it's employees as a manager and a leader or customers. And I really look at the two in very similar paths and how I would approach those opportunities to work with the team as a leader and again with customers. And so for me, kind of that flopping back and forth between individual contributor and an actual people leader has just made sense. And it's given me the opportunity to take different skills and different experiences from each one of those roles to build upon into where I am now. And so, even though I'm, in an individual contributor position, I still have a very, senior CS background compared to, folks that I'm working with and our customers. A lot of our customers, they are startups. They are a company that they're building a team, and I've been there. I've done that, and I can help them to grow and develop. And I wouldn't be able to do that successfully if I hadn't been in their shoes. And so I feel that that's just a great opportunity for me. Do I want to be back in a leadership role in the future? Absolutely. I mean, I do love leading teams and building processes and doing all that wonderful stuff too. But I also love what I'm doing today. So for me, it is just that opportunity, and to not look at it as a negative stepping back or taking a step down, because it's really not. It just really depends on where you are in your career. And yes, leading people and being in charge is not fun. There's some days where you're like, nope, I don't want to do it. Nope, I don't have anyone reporting to me. I'm only in charge of myself and my book of business. And it's really great.
I can definitely say I probably had more restful sleep as an individual contributor than I did as a people leader. All right, very good. Well, thank you both for sharing that. So Al, let's pivot. I want to anchor in on some of what you've talked about, right? You kind of took a different path altogether, right? You kind of came from agency life into customer success, supporting agencies, and then dovetailed back into marketing. And so I love that story because I think what's really interesting is that there are so many transferable skills to get you into customer success, but what you learn as a customer success professional actually builds and develops each person in a well-rounded way, as Vanessa, you anchored on earlier, which just allows you to go, if you want to go into sales, if you want to go to marketing. I've seen successful transitions into product, right? You spend so much time with your product team and your customers understanding the product. So I love that you pivoted from this kind of world of customer success back into marketing. So I'd love to hear your story and how you think being in customer success helps set you up to be wildly successful in your role that you're in today.
Yeah, sure thing. And I feel like I've said this a lot just in conversations throughout my career with people who ask, like, how did I get to where I am? I feel like a role in customer success, as you're alluding to, like, just gives you so many open door possibilities for where you want to go next. Like, you understand the customer at the core, which is like the most important thing. You're probably close to the product or whatever the core value is that you're providing. And you could work on like sales skills, marketing skills, what have you, all in the same context. So it's really a great like jumping off point for any career trajectory, which I always like attribute back to like, I'm in marketing, but like, I don't think I would have been here if I wasn't in customer success first, understood the customer, understand their pain points, and was able to take those transferable skills into my next role. So to your question, like I totally attribute to it. And I think it's like a very good jumping off point. I think another thing that I always kind of keep in mind too, is that like, even when you do like move on to like say a marketing role or a different role at the org, always bringing it back to like solving for the customer has always helped me as even as a marketer, right? Like figure out complex problems. A lot of the times, if you just start from that point of like, what can we do to solve for the customer and then work your way back, you can always find the answer that you need. So like, it's helped me in a number of ways, not just in terms of my career, but in terms of like how I solve problems and how I work across the team.
That's great. What would you say is the number one skill or soft skill, hard skill that you learned as a customer success professional that you rely on so heavily today in your role?
Just got to talk to customers more. I think like the further away you get from a customer, the more you are at risk from like losing sight of what really matters. So for me, like I try to talk to customers at least once, twice a week to understand like what they're struggling with, where we can help. And from a marketing standpoint, it just makes my job a whole lot easier. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's just like listen to the customer and always keep in touch with them.
I love that. And I think that advice actually holds true to support anyone transitioning into product, marketing, sales, any of the like. So I think that's awesome advice. Thank you. All right, Max, on to you. You probably have the more traditional journey in terms of customer success, right? Kind of going from this account management to an IC role and kind of building up into a higher level leadership role. So I'd love to hear your story. And, more importantly, I'd love if you could anchor on how do you feel like being a frontline CSM has helped you prepare to be the leader that you are today?
Yeah, great question. The recipe for success certainly won't be the same for everyone, but here are the skill sets that I found that worked for me when standing out from my peers, in that journey on that path. The first one, to Al's point, everything that he just touched on, early on, I learned how to solution. When you're at the beginning of your career, you often become quite skilled at recognizing problems, but it definitely takes a certain amount of experience, maturity, drive to not just state the problem, but to come up with a few solutions to present to management. If you can master that, trust me, they'll appreciate it. Number two, learn how CS maps and plugs into the larger revenue organization. This is huge. If you can learn how CS works with marketing, sales, product, engineering, finance, legal, etc., it will help make you an incredibly valuable player on the CS team, but also a huge asset for the company overall. You'll start to learn organizational metrics like CAC to LTV ratio, why it matters if a customer has net 45 or net 60 billing terms, or how special contract terms negotiated upstream in the sales process can impact a renewal. The last part of this is just make your boss's job easier. If you can, I can't say this one enough. If you can figure out a way to make your boss's job easier, deload them, take things off their plate, it will build trust and it organically gives you more responsibility. And that's a very clear path if you're interested in it to get to more senior roles and into leadership. To the original question about being, frontline and how that impacted my ability, I 100% feel that being a frontline CSM did help prepare me for leadership roles. It allowed me to relate to challenges that my team members experience on a day-to-day basis and equip me with a skill set to help them navigate those strategic and tactical challenges and really get them through some tricky situations.
That's awesome, Max. And I agree. In fact, I think not that long ago, I did a webinar with Mark and the client success team on just that, right? The skills you develop as a frontline CSM really do, I think, help prepare leaders in a way that maybe if you're transitioning from a different leadership role into leading customer success organization, you don't have the same level of credibility and true deep understanding of the pains that as a leader you're solving for. So it's something I stand behind. Maybe not everyone agrees with me, but I do love that you have that experience because I do think it helps build that trust and credibility and just that more intimacy with your team, to your point.
Absolutely.
So that's great. All right, guys. So let's open this up a little bit more broadly. I loved all of your stories, but if you're anything like me, you've had to look back at some of the decisions you've made along the way and might have done things a little bit differently. So this is kind of, if you had to make a change, right, to change maybe the outcome of where you are today, what would you have done differently? So Max, while we've got you up here, why don't we start with you? So looking back at your career, what would you have done differently to change the outcome?
Great question. So for me, I think earlier on in my career, I was a little bit more of a yes man, where I was just kind of told to do things and not question it. As I got further along in my career, in terms of changing outcomes, I began to think. Here's the best way to explain it. A lot of people think, self-team company. I'm sorry, and I think company, team, self. So when I started to kind of master that and really point more towards that line of thinking, I did not become a yes man. I became an actual shareholder in the company, and that leveled me up to think broader and across the org and what I did on that one team, how it impacted the broader organization. So that was kind of I wish I learned that sooner.
I love that. That's a great point and great advice for folks who are just now kind of entering that mindset, right? And thinking through that. Krista, what about you?
I think for me, again, it's very similar to what Max said, but, and I had mentioned earlier, just taking control of my career and my future earlier. I really love all the experiences that I had, but as I mentioned before, there was one opportunity that, it was great, but there was just no growth and I just stayed too long. And I was doing everything I could, similar to what Max said, really learning about the business as a whole and how what I was doing was contributing, kind of pushed myself into like a team lead type role unofficially, but, kind of made just for me to feel like I was doing something more. But it wasn't recognized. It wasn't, really valued to the level that it should be. So for me, it would be probably to have exited that opportunity a lot earlier than I did, and jump into something else where I would be able to have that opportunity. But I learned some great lessons from that, and can give wonderful advice on if something just feels like it's done, it's over, it probably is, and you just need to move on and find something new.
That's great advice, Krista. I've had similar experiences myself when I look back. Vanessa, what about you? What would you have done differently?
Yeah, it's a tough question because, I feel like things just always end up working out, right? Whether it in that moment or not. I think every decision or, job I've gotten has led me to where I'm right now, where I'm extremely happy. So that's really great. I think one thing that maybe I would have done differently and leaned into a lot more, that I think I found out maybe in like the end of my second career, so maybe like 6 or 7 years working post college, was just like the power of external mentors. So I think, there's always a lot to be said about having internal mentors and sponsors at your company, right? Someone senior who can give you kind of insight, they can give you projects, to Max's point though, you've shown that you can make their life easier. So that's kind of how you work your way into like an informal mentor role over time. But I think external mentors are, at least in my life, more impactful. So, it's able to, and back in the day, pre-COVID, these are people that I met at Gainsight Pulses, right? And so, there'd be senior customer success leaders there, and I would introduce myself and form a relationship. And then, form that over time, people who you can say, oh, I'm having this issue at work, or I'm thinking about leaving this company to go to this company. Like, what are your ideas? What are your thoughts? I just think having external mentor, someone that's not currently in your company that you can even be more open with, has just been so impactful for my career, this second half of it. And I think it's just going to continue to be that way. So again, yeah, lean into mentors, both internally, but also externally.
Awesome advice. And Al, what about you?
I think for me, it's just being more proactive and vocal about what I want and where I want to go. Kind of echoes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this, where, how you own your career. I think for me, for example, there's this one point where I remember the marketing team was going through a reorg, and there was somebody who had started before after me, so their tenure was a lot shorter than me at the org, and was at sort of my same level. When that reorg happened, they were now my manager. Because that person had proactively, taken management courses and proactively advocated for it. I remember when I found out about that, I felt like I was shot with a longbow in the chest. I was like, oh man, this sucks. I thought I was doing everything right to get there. And I think for me, I talked to my manager afterwards. He's like, I just didn't know you would have wanted to do that. We should have talked about that more proactively and worked on it. And I was just like, oh, okay. Well, now I'm going to do that from now on. So I feel like I would have done that a little bit earlier on. And now I make an effort to be like, this is what I want. I'm going to be very transparent about it. And let's work on it. So.
I love that. And I do think that's great advice. I, like you, probably, I don't know if anyone can imagine me not being vocal, but there was a time in my life, in my career, where I wasn't as vocal. So I get that. Awesome, guys. So let's segue. I think we have time for a couple more questions. We'll see. Listen, I think all of us can agree that we didn't get to where we are just by learning on a whim. And I'm sure each of us invest some time, some energy, some effort in helping us grow, learn, and develop. So I'd love to hear from each of you what you do regularly to continue to grow professionally. So Al, let's start with you.
Yeah, great question. I always try to work on something that would kind of make me uncomfortable, with coding, for instance. I moved into the platform world because I thought platform ecosystems were really fascinating, but I was never too technical, and some of that stuff kind of scared me a little bit. But I kind of took the plunge, and I pushed myself to code a basic website and code an app and actually learn about it. And it got me closer to actually being more passionate about what I was working on, even though it was at a more higher level. So just pushing myself into uncharted territory and just feeling just try it and see what you can do. So I think that's been most helpful for me.
Awesome. Krista, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's just, continuing to just dig more into the customer success space, whether it be through certifications, books. There's just so much, networking, and everyone has, wonderful content that they're pushing out there and sharing with each other. And I think the certification piece was a big one for me, because I felt oh, I've been doing this for 5 years. I don't need to learn anything else. No, there's still a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. And just, it helps you to think of things different ways. So that's really helpful. And just really, expanding my network. And like Vanessa had mentioned, having mentors, and whether they're inside your company or outside, I think is huge. And kind of finding a leader or someone to gravitate towards to help you as you grow in your career. That's really helped me to just kind of find those people and even peers as well.
Awesome. Max, you?
Yeah. So to Krista and Vanessa's point, yeah, definitely speak with other CS leaders, mentors. You do not have to do this all on your own, I promise. Sales has a term they call always be closing, ABC. I have a always be learning or ABL mentality. So yeah, I speak to other CS leaders. I read books. There's this great book by a hostage negotiator who worked for the FBI called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. That's an amazing book. I read blog posts. I just learned from other leaders also within my organization as well. I think the ability to continue to learn is one of the most powerful skill sets you can have, and it will take you very, very far in this industry and beyond.
That's great advice. And it's funny, actually, someone just sent me Never Split the Difference, and there was no note in the Amazon box. So if anyone listening is the person who sent it, just send me a note on LinkedIn, because I still have no idea where this book came from. I have read it, but I will cherish the book and appreciate the gesture. Vanessa, what about you?
Yeah, everything that everyone just said, I just have a plus on that. I think for me, my personality type is I really like webinars and podcasts. So I sign up to all of the Gainsight webinars, to Tango webinars. And even if I can't make it that live session on my calendar, they generally send you a recording, and I'll just put them on when I'm getting ready in the morning. Like, oh, I'm doing my hair, or I'm like making coffee, and I'll listen to, I'll try to catch up on the webinar, even if I'm only like half listening. But, I'm getting to Max's point, I'm getting another leader's perspective on something. With the podcast, I'm not that much of a customer success geek. I don't like wake up every morning and listen to a CS podcast. But, if there's like a particular challenge or something I'm working on, I'll just like go search like customer success, executive sponsorship, and there'll generally be a podcast about that topic. So, and again, I just put it on, go for a walk or get ready in the morning. So I think, yeah, webinars and podcasts. And then speaking of shameless plugs, Christy, I follow you on LinkedIn and I love all of your infographics. So if anyone on this does not follow Christy or what is it, CS Real Simple, highly recommend that. And I think I was telling you the other day, I'm obsessed with the content you put out. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Vanessa. And you were not paid to say that. So I do appreciate it. I think giving back to the community and just making sure that everyone understands that, again, Max, to your point, right? You're not in this alone. We're all solving for the same problems. We're not competing with one another. It's okay to not know the answer, but guess what? Somebody probably has navigated it. So use the community to your advantage. All right, guys, we've got just over a minute. So we're gonna do like a speed fire advice round. Last question. So Vanessa, we're gonna start with you. What's your one piece of advice you can give to frontline CSMs right now who are thinking about the next step in their career?
Oh God, I think what we all said, be the CEO of your own career, right? You're in charge of, who's working with you, what you want to achieve, CEO of your own career, and just really take full control of it.
Awesome. Al.
Always solve for the customer and you can never go wrong.
Love it. Max.
Be authentic to yourself. As you come across situations where you struggle to figure out the best path forward for yourself or the company, take a moment to reflect on your values, your vision, and what's important to you, and use that as your guiding principle. If you master that, I think you'll find success no matter what you do.
I love that. Krista.
How do I follow that? Well, ditto. No, I think one thing that I've always thought is just going with that continuous learning is you don't need to know it all now. So just give yourself some grace and, take your time growing and developing, but, just take control of it, but you don't need to know it all right this second. Do your due diligence, learn, take it all in, network, find someone to gravitate towards.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for your invaluable contributions to today's discussion. Your journeys are much to be emulated and celebrated. You've all had tremendous success in your careers. I wish you continued success in your careers, and really thank you and appreciate all of your parts of the discussion today. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All rock stars. I can't thank you guys enough. Christy, Max, Krista, Al, Vanessa. Was amazing. Really appreciate you taking the time. And, I've been watching the chat. People have learned a ton. It's been awesome to see. And, speaking of career paths and next moves and, different things, Christy, I understand you have a little bit of news to share with the good folks out here.
I do. And, I will say this was probably the hardest secret to keep. I'm not really good at keeping exciting, good, can be public secrets. Let's put it that way. But I am thrilled to announce, I put some ambiguous LinkedIn posts out there about some change in my career and exciting things that were happening. But I am thrilled to be joining the client success team as their VP of customer success. So Mark, you and I get to work together all the time. I'm sure you're thrilled.
We'll take it, man. We'll take it. No, we are pumped. The entire team here at Client Success, we are thrilled. We've been huge fans of you for as long as we can remember. And, the thought leadership that you put out there, we are looking forward to not only, what we can do together to build more thought leadership, but also just the work that you're going to do with, driving value for our team, for our customers, and for the entire industry. So super excited for you to join the team.
Thank you, Mark. I am so pumped, and I get to work with Krista and Kyle again, who have been part of my journey.
That's
so
right.
It's just really, really exciting all around. And I'm thrilled. I've had the pleasure of spending time over the years with Dave, and so very easy decision for me. I've really appreciated all the thought leadership that comes out of client success, and the leadership and the vision, and more importantly, the commitment that client success has to their customers. I mean, that just philosophically aligns with who I am and what I want to be doing. So I'm really excited about this journey.
Awesome.